Hey there, and welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast. We're fueled by the incredible clients who inspire us every day, allowing us to elevate their health and fitness journeys. On this show, you'll gain valuable insights from top professionals, hear inspiring transformation stories, and discover the knowledge and motivation to create your own best life. Let's dive in. As someone who has continuously used therapy as a way to heal and elevate my personal performance, I know wholeheartedly that you cannot always read the label when you're in the jar. And that's why it's so helpful to have a professional in your corner to talk to. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp to provide our listeners with the opportunity to work with a licensed therapist from the comfort of your own home. Receive 10% off your first month when you sign up by going to betterhelp.com/TFL. That's betterhelp.com/T as in think, F as in fitness, L as in life. And remember, you're not alone. There are people out there who can help.
All right. Welcome back to the Think Fitness Life podcast. Today, we're going to dive into developing the anaerobic system and strength for long distance runners. How does increasing a 3 rep on a back squat or bench press, as an example, transfer to strength endurance for a marathon per se? What is the benefit of power development, and why do we strength train for long endurance athletes? This topic is very, very, very commonly misunderstood. I think there's a big thought difference between strength athletes and endurance athletes. And there's this notion that a lot of endurance athletes don't need to strength train. And I can understand that. I can respect that. And I've trained at a couple different stops that I've worked at. There's always been the endurance athletes, or the athletes that are more on the longer aerobic side of the training spectrum, that really are not into strength training. They really don't see it as a beneficial thing. They also see it as sometimes a negative thing, because they're worried, and I totally understand and respect the worry. They are worried that if they get too far into strength training, they're going to put on muscle mass, they're going to increase their body weight, and then they're going to decrease their performance. Totally get that. We're going to break that down today. We're going to dive into why we should strength train if you're an endurance athlete, and what's the purpose of it. Why do we want to develop all these systems when it comes to your goal being a long distance runners? And we'll consider long distance runners, or for me, I consider long distance runners anyone who's doing a mile or above. You have your let's call it the 55, the 60, the 100, the 110 hurdles, 200, 400, 800. Once you get past the 800, it becomes a different race. Yeah, you're still in those people running miles are still in threshold, but as we get above that, they're more into the longer distance endurance. It's not a quick sprint. You're training the systems to really be good at that, at what your end goal is. Now, for long distance runners, the main base of training is going to be aerobics. You're going to have to do your zone 2 training. You're going to have to do your zone 3s, your speed work. And for long distance runners, speed work and threshold is a lot different than what the anaerobic athlete thinks they are. Speed work for long distance runners are more based on your mile times or your pace times. Where speed work for an anaerobic athlete, we're talking more about sprint mechanics, acceleration, deceleration, change of direction. It becomes a little bit different when we start talking about training for the different kind of athletes or the different kind of person, because everyone who is training for something is an athlete or just training in general. When it comes to strength training for an endurance athlete, this is where I think people get misled a lot of times. And this is going to happen for years. And I think it's still going to happen for a while because most people don't understand muscle physiology. Most people are looking at strength training and they're going to associate strength training with someone Arnold, who was a bodybuilder, and some of these athletes who lift really, really heavy weights and they have a lot of mass on them. And they see that and they go, well, if I strength train and get too muscle bound, then they're going to get slow. But that's been disproven years and years in sports over sports to an extent, depending on the sport. We always want to train the sport for the adaptation that that person needs for that discipline. When we're talking long distance runners, we need to have a primary focus on the aerobic training systems. Now, most of that's going to come from the long distance running, the long distance training. That's going to cover your bases. When it comes to strength training for the long distance runners, it really comes down to we are developing quality tissue for optimal function, optimal force development, and to prevent overuse injuries or overuse wear and tear. As long distance runners, they are going into repetition after repetition after repetition of certain mechanics as they're running. The basis, when we strip it down, when we get into gait retraining, we talk about retraining gait mechanics. It's not about getting strong. Yes, it is about getting strong, but that's not the overall goal. And I think people look at strength training or weight training as you just need to put on muscle mass and get strong. When talking to your endurance athlete, that's not the goal. The goal is to strengthen the appropriate motor patterns and sequencing to become strong in the right muscle chain. The right muscles, the correct muscles can turn on and off when they're going through forward locomotion, when they're going through running strides. Things need to turn on one side and off on the other, and side to side of the body. When we get into trouble as long distance runners, we start to get overuse injuries, whether it's shin splints, knee pain, lower back pain, hip pain, and these can result in stress fractures, is we're overusing certain patterns. First thing we need to do when it comes to strength training program or developing a program to repattern gait mechanics, or if you don't have to repattern gait mechanics, just keep your mechanics strong. We need to add more load to the tissue allow the tissue to be broken down and built back stronger. Many runners will say, oh, well, I get all the force of impact when I go out and run, and that's where I can build the muscle and I can get load through the bones and tendons. Not wrong, but to certain degrees, that's not going to be the primary focus of why they're doing it. And the goal is to overload the system. When you're going on zone 2 training, you're probably not really overloading the system compared to if I have someone doing a back squat for 3 to 5 reps. I am now purposely overloading the tissues to create an adaptation change to understand proper sequencing of muscles firing, because this could be a topic for a whole nother episode. If you perform strength training in the wrong sequencing, in the wrong patterns, aka you have the wrong muscles on, that's going to lead to the body saying, hey, when we go into this position, we need these muscles on. And it's actually training the wrong pattern, the wrong muscle chain in order training the wrong muscle chain for gait mechanics. That's number one. That's very, very specific when it comes to training if you were a long distance runner or just a runner in general. And then what we're looking at is being able to overload the tissues to get an adaptation from a fiber type. Now, we're going to look at more of a type 2 fiber type, but we're also strengthening the muscle tendon juncture, muscles and tendons, to be able to withstand more force. If I add more weight on a bar or a dumbbell and I can load the tissues, load the muscle, load the tendon, I can overload it and send signals to the brain going, we have more tension on the system. We need to adapt to it. We need to be able to withstand more tension. As we get into running, the body says, hey, if we ever reach that peak of tension or force, we can withstand this. But over repetitions of thousands of foot contacts, we can maintain and have the ability to withstand that force because we grew the tissue stronger. The cross-sectional area has more links to it to attach the myosin and actin, but it's not going to get overused and get torn. The other part of that is when you're adding more ability to the cross-sectional area and you're adding and getting stronger, you're creating your body to produce more force through the muscles. When you can produce more force, you then can now push into the ground harder and stronger. That will also change your running economies. If you can produce more force, each stride is going to be more powerful. Therefore, if you are able to train and take less strides, because you're more forceful, you can cover more distance with less energy expended because you're increasing your force production. Those two are the biggest things that I talk to my runners with when it comes to why we're strength training. There's this real big concern about becoming muscle bound, which right off the bat, I'm going to say most runners, they're not going to be training enough in the rep ranges, in the set ranges to really drive a lot of muscle mass being put on, right? We are talking, if you're a runner, maybe 30 to 40 minute strength training sessions a week versus someone who's more of a power athlete, let's say a football player. They're going to train in the off season. They're going to strength train 5 to 6 days a week, depending on their schedule. The bulk of their training is going to be more geared towards force production and putting on lean body mass. It really is going to be, the adaptation is going to be dictated by where you spend majority of your time training. If you're a runner, there's no need to be strength training 4 times a week for an hour trying to do a bodybuilding program, because your body's trying to recover from a high amount of volume from muscle damage side. Then it's going to also start to look at, okay, I need to now recover from high amounts of aerobic work. And you can't be the best at both. That's one thing learned early on in school, is your body's got to adapt to be good at almost one specific thing. Now there's in the middle, there'll lie some athletes, CrossFitters, that are good at both, but no CrossFit athlete is going to be really good at a triathlon. No CrossFit athlete is going to be really, really good at a marathon if their training is more geared towards CrossFit, and vice versa. A marathon runner won't just drop into CrossFit and excel because they'll get crushed by some of the weights. The CrossFitter will get crushed by the volume of the marathon because they might be a bigger frame and have more metabolic tissue on it. Their body's going to take more of a stress load. When it comes to the training, you really have to be specific on what your goal is. We're talking long distance runners. Long distance runners are going to predominantly spending majority 80 to 90% of their training in aerobic work zones. So that's what their body's going to adapt to. And throwing in 2 strength training sessions a week is not going to throw them out, as long as the programming is appropriate for that strength training session. We talk strength training sessions. We know that they're getting a lot of volume on the road, a lot of running volume. I am not looking to add more volume in a strength training session. We're going to do maybe at first some higher reps of motor patterning stuff, but I am not looking to load someone's system heavy and do 3 sets of 15 on squats. I might do 3 sets of 15 on body weight squats or step throughs, something that's lower CNS, but I'm not going to do something that's going to drive high fatigue and be really taxing on the system. Hence why I will take the reps down, maybe increase the weight, because my goal is more force production. If I can get higher weight, less reps to increase force production because I'm developing certain fiber types, that's where I'm going to go. And I'm not gassing them out. I'm not taking away recovery from aerobic work to now have to put towards hypertrophy work, which is anything over 8 reps. Anything over 8 reps, when you start to strength train, especially lower body, runners out there, you are going to be sore, especially if you've never done it. If you have ever done a workout where, let's say it's rear foot elevated split squats, you have 3 sets of 8 and you haven't done them in a while and you're in a training program that has them, you do 3 sets of 8 with rear foot elevated split squats, you're going to feel sore the next day in the quads, glutes, and hamstrings. That's going to be natural because your body needs to adapt to a stimulus you're not used to, and it needs to adapt because you're now in the hypertrophy range of muscle building. Anything 8+ reps is going to be hypertrophy, which means you are going to develop your type 1 and type 2 fibers to increase in muscle size. This is where I always feel a lot of athletes, especially endurance athletes, get it wrong because we're not looking to put on muscle mass. But when you go into these higher rep ranges, that is triggering your body to say, hey, we need to increase the size of our muscle fibers in the myofibrils. In their head, they're thinking, okay, if I do lightweight, low reps, I'm going to be more toning and not putting a lot of stress on the system. But as soon as you go into high reps and you get the metabolic stress and some fatigue, your primary driving is hypertrophy. Have a different outlook on it. Start looking at 3 to 6 on the rep range. Start looking at, I can add a little bit more strength work in, intensity, weight on the bar, weight on the dumbbells will be a little bit heavier because now I can drive more force production. I can strengthen tendons. I can strengthen the muscles a little bit differently with a little bit more load and not create such a high demand of stress that they're sore the next day. That would be one reason. That would be the benefit of developing, we'll call it the anaerobic system, the strength system, is for basically tissue quality, force production, and that force production is to be able to have a better running economy and then to be able to withstand the amount of impact that long distance runners go through, to not have overuse patterns come up that will lead to overuse injuries. Does increasing a 3 rep max on a back squat or bench press, as an example, transfer to strength endurance for marathon per se? No, not really. We can't come out and say if you increase your 3 rep max on the back squat that you're going to run a faster marathon. A lot of these numbers, when it comes to the weight room, you're getting stronger, but the transfer really comes in the training of the mechanics. You're never going to hear, if you increase your 3 rep max, you're going to be able to sprint faster. No, that's not the case, because if you just get strong in a 3 rep max and never train sprinting, it doesn't mean you're inherently going to get faster. It could. If you've never strength trained, there's research out there that shows that you just increase strength, you're going to increase force production, you're going to get faster. When we're talking about people who are doing this consistently, just shooting a 3 rep max on a bench or a back squat is not going to automatically equal. I don't want people thinking, if I just do this, I'm going to get faster. No, you need to put the work in to develop that specific pattern and and specific energy system. Just we do for sprint work, you're going to get stronger through strength training, and then you need to go run. You need to go do your long distance, your short distance, your 800-meter repeats, whatever the repeats are, your 1K repeats, your long, slow, your threshold training. That all comes into play as we are developing a long distance runner. What that looks from a program standpoint, we're going to bring in a marathon runner that I write the training for. We're going to dive into what we look for and how we're going to break that up. Stay tuned for that episode. But next, I want to touch on when we do have injured runners coming into our clinic and they're looking to increase their ability to produce force, looking to increase their running economy. The biggest thing that I focus on, as I said earlier, is retraining the right muscle patterns, the sequencing and timing of muscles turning on, getting facilitated, and then being inhibited to allow the body to push off, to heel strike, to go through the full excursion of running mechanics. Once we set that in, and these are going to be your more of your warm-up techniques, but your pattern techniques where you're holding more techniques where you're holding isometrics and you're breathing through patterns and you're feeling hamstrings, glutes, and adductors turn on, and we're putting you in running specific patterns, whether it's late stance push off, whether it's mid stance, whether it's early stance. We're putting you in all these different phases of gait to train the system to the brain knows that when I'm in this phase, these muscles needs to be working. Now we really strip it down and have individuals at first really sensing and feeling the correct muscles engaging, because that mind body, that brain body neuro connection is the most important part to train. Hands down, I don't care if you get stronger. I don't care if you don't increase your 3RM. If you can find and feel the correct muscles engaging and have that neuro sense, that cognitive sense of those muscles activating and turning on, and you can activate them, that's more important, because that's the number one thing the brain is going to sense when it's going into running. It's not thinking, oh, I need to squeeze the glutes, I need to push the ear. We're going at a speed where we need to have these patterns on. And when the foot hits the ground really fast, these patterns need to turn on and turn off depending on where we are. Training that stuff is number one. Day one on someone gait retraining, am I having them do back squats and am I worried about getting them strong? No, not really, because I need to really remap their system and understand the right patterns and chains to turn on. Then once we have the right patterns and chains, then we can implement them into your standard exercises, your squat, your deadlift, your rear foot elevated split squats. Now, this will all happen during that hour that I see that person, but main thing at first, the first big chunk, what we're doing is we're doing the repatterning exercises to get them going. And if you do have any questions on those techniques, please reach out. Go check out my Instagram. I do a ton of postural restoration techniques for gait mechanics to reestablish and repattern the body's left and right side of function to help people get out of their chains that they might be stuck in from overuse standpoint, or where they feel they might be limited. Then the next portion of the session is we're going to dive into sprint mechanics. As we said earlier, I use low reps, high intensity, and we're training force development. Sprint mechanic training is the same exact concept. Even though long distance runners might never get into full sprint mechanics, you see people coming out of a block. The premise of still teaching force and power production out of techniques of A skips, A marches, high knee runs, sled pushes, wall sprints, it teaches the body to be powerful and forceful, pushing down and back, and to be able to create as much force as possible to push the body forward. And this is where I feel one of the greatest transfers besides the repatterning techniques comes in, because you're now putting those people who are endurance runners in their mechanics of what they're doing, and you're strengthening that. Number one, probably one of the best things to retrain gait mechanics, a sled push. A slow sled push is going to be one of the best to teach you how to understand how to go through mid stance, push off, hip extension, knee extension at the same time. Even it's going to teach you knee flexion and hip flexion at the same time as the foot hits the ground. Then we're going to go through hip extension and knee extension at the same time to get the body to be pushed forward, strengthening all the muscles of the lower body in sequence as the body's in this forward state of leaning. We're taking the arms out of it. We're taking balance out of it. And we are now using lower body push to really drive the system to be strong going forward. And if that's one exercise to build strength as a runner, that would trump the squat for me. That would trump the deadlift, heavy sled pushes to get strong in the pattern. Then eventually you need to now take away the slowness, because we need you to run fast, and we need to go more of the sled sprints to put that fully in motion to understand force production. But when you couple that with a full program, when you have warm up, you have PRI techniques to repattern, then you have sprint mechanics to work on force production, horizontal and vertical push, then you can add your strength training right at the end, where you're talking your squats, your single leg work, your upper body work. That's what a full training program for running is going to look like. Many people, I think they think it's going to look as bodybuilding, where you're doing 10 to 12 different exercises. No, the main focus for long distance runners when it comes to strength training, yeah, you want to get stronger and you can always push those numbers. The volume of lifting is not going to be as high as people think. You might be doing, this is going to sound crazy, you might be doing a total of 60 reps of all your strength training exercises in a day. What that might look, you do your warm up, you do your repatterning techniques, you do your sprint work. That might take 30 minutes. And then the next 30 minutes are going to be focused on, let's say you do squats. Let's say we do 5 sets of 3 on squats paired with 4 sets of 6 on push-ups. And then the next series, we're going to do single leg deadlifts or some single leg variation for 3 sets of 8. And then we're going to pair it with triceps. Let's call it 2 sets of 20. You're at 103 reps in total. And a lot of it is not even lower body volume. And some of the volume might change, and it might be less. You could be at 60 reps. You could be north of 100. But the point I'm making is we're not at 100 reps of just straight leg work. We're maybe at 35, 40 reps of leg work, which is plenty, which is right where you want to be to develop strength. Maybe 25 to 40 reps working glutes, working full body. Obviously, you got to focus on a lot of hamstring work too. That's really where it's going to lie in the volume. And then upper body. Upper body is super important for runners. Even though they're not going to think it, triceps are one of the most important muscles to train as a runner, because your triceps and hamstrings function together. The hamstring and tricep on the ipsilateral or on contralateral side, when you go to heel strike and you bring your foot back, that arm's coming back on the other side. That's helping you decelerate the body to accelerate the other side of the body for running economy. Strong hamstrings require strong triceps. You really have to understand and train the upper body, because that's what's going to be guiding and rotating us into the right positions. Scapulas on thoraxes and thorax moving under scapulas. The arm swing, those rotations are going to help control the legs. Runners, please, if you're listening to this, really pay attention. I'm not saying you have to go and do a boatload of arms. Get some biceps and triceps in every workout. Twice a week, get it in. Triceps are really important, especially triceps with hamstrings. If you don't have a question why biceps are important, take your arm right now and do the running motion. The biceps and chest and pec help rotate the body to the other side. As I swing forward and rotate, my leg is going to understand push off as my arm is telling my body and my leg, we are rotating our center of mass to the other side. We need to push there and find the muscle chains, adductors, glutes, hamstrings to support us on the other side. We can cycle back and forth and run. I always throw in upper body work when it comes to training runners. It's the most important thing, and my runners have been super successful from even adding 3 sets of 6 on push-ups and doing some hamstrings paired with it in their overall program. But majority of the running programs, if someone wants to get really good at long distance running, train repatterning. And once you've understood repatterning, you get it. It is sprint mechanics on sprint mechanics, and then getting strong through muscles and tendons. That's going to wrap us up today on the episode of why we would strength train for long and distance endurance runners. We are going to dive into next on this running series. We're going to bring in my wife who runs marathons, and we program her strength training in twice a week. We're going to dive into what that pertains and what that looks like, why we're doing certain exercises, why we're going to look at certain plyometrics, why we're doing certain explosive works, how we periodize that. Then we're going to dive into what it takes to recover as a long distance endurance athlete, because this is where a lot of the athletes, they get screwed up. They do not know how to recover, and they get injured, they get overworked, and then they're not fueling properly. When it comes to race day or when it comes to training, they're not hitting their optimization. That's next week. We will catch you later.
Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie here from Think Fitness Life. Our entire careers have been dedicated to fitness, particularly how the mind helps the body. We've been around gyms and nutrition strategies for 25 plus years collectively, and nothing harms or helps better than your own mind, untrained or trained. Pushing beyond your limits, overcoming whatever's thrown your way, and making the decision to show up day in and day out as a lifestyle takes more soul than sand. And what I mean by that is when you can get your mindset and heart leading you consistently in the direction of your goals and dreams, well, it's just a matter of time before you have the performance, physique, or quality of life you're yearning for. See, your thoughts will stem from your beliefs, which will then lead you to action, which develop into your behavior and ultimately lead you to results. It's really that simple. Our process takes time, and it takes open communication. It's amazing what pops up along the fitness journey to betterment, and we can be there every step of the way. To learn more or apply for coaching, visit www.thinkfitnesslife.com. Start recreating your life today.